I spent my whole life giving. Love, time, money, myself, always pouring out, never asking for much in return. Then one night, over a table filled with food I had bought and prepared, I heard something that shattered me. It wasn't just hurtful, it changed everything. This isn't just a story of humiliation, it's a story of awakening. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, if you've ever given so much that you started to disappear, then I'm talking to you. I don't want this to be a one-sided story, so if any part of this feels familiar, please leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and maybe even a little bit of your story if you feel safe to share. I promise, I'm reading every single one. The day had begun in its usual beautiful manner. When you're 74, everything unfolds slowly and beautifully. The sun filtered softly through the living room window, casting quiet golden shapes on the carpet. The kind of light that makes you think everything is fine, that the world is peaceful, that you're safe. I was sitting in my usual spot, the old blue armchair with the floral cushion Thomas gave me for my birthday last year. He'd said it matched my eyes, though he hadn't looked me in the eye once that day. It was a Tuesday, ordinary in every way, until it wasn't. My knees ached from the rain the night before. I had just made myself a piece of toast and sat down with the crossword puzzle, pencil in hand. Across the hall, I heard the creak of the floorboard that always gave Thomas away when he walked through the kitchen. He never tried to fix it. Said it gave the house character. I said it gave me heart attacks. "Hey, Mom," he called out. "You doing okay in there?" His voice was light, almost cheery. It didn't match the heavy quiet that hung in the air. "I'm fine," I called back, just trying to remember a 7-letter word for betrayal. I meant it as a joke, but I'd remember that line later. How it wasn't a joke at all. Thomas appeared a moment later, walking slowly like he didn't want to startle me. He wore his usual khakis, a button-down shirt tucked a bit too tightly around his middle, and that soft smile he always used when he wanted something. But today, it didn't quite reach his eyes. In his hand was a tall glass of water. He held it out to me. "You should drink something," he said. "Stay hydrated." I looked at the glass. Nothing special. Clear. Cold. No lemon slice like I usually liked. Just water. But something about the way he handed it to me, so deliberate, made my fingers hesitate before wrapping around the glass. "Thanks," I said slowly. He stood over me for a moment as I took the glass. Then he sat down on the couch across from me, folding his hands neatly in his lap, like we were about to have a very important talk. "Just thinking," he said, "how lucky I am to still have you around." A strange thing to say. Sweet, maybe, but off. I replied, pretending to focus on my crossword again. But my eyes kept sliding back to the water. Then he said it. "You know, a lot of people don't realize how fragile life is until it's too late." He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring past me, at the mantel, or the old clock, or nothing at all. Something was off. It wasn't just the glass of water. It was his whole energy. He wasn't fidgeting like he usually did. He wasn't half listening while typing on his phone. He was too present, too careful. "Did something happen?" I asked. He blinked and smiled again. That smile again. Too soft. Like I was a porcelain doll he was afraid to break. "No, nothing happened," he said, rising to his feet. "Just, you've been more tired lately, that's all. Thought maybe you could use a little care." Then he leaned over and kissed the top of my head. And just like that, he was gone. I sat there, holding that glass of water in my hand, my palm warming the cool condensation. I watched the door swing shut behind him, heard the front door open and close, heard his car pull away from the driveway like any other day. I set the glass down on the coffee table, didn't drink a drop. Instead, I picked up the crossword puzzle again, staring at the word I had joked about just minutes before. 2 days later, the letter arrived. It came in a plain white envelope, the kind that usually carries nothing but credit card offers or reminders from the electric company. But this one had weight. Not literal weight. Something in the way it felt in my hands made my fingers tighten around it. My name was printed in black ink on the front. No return address. Just a neatly typed label. Margaret Holloway. That's me. I sat down at the kitchen table, glasses on the edge of my nose, the letter opener trembling just slightly in my hand. My late husband used to say I had nerves of steel. He wasn't wrong. I've lived through war, grief, loneliness, and childbirth in a time when you did it without anything but a nurse's firm hand and your own screams echoing off the walls. But this letter gave me pause. I slid the opener under the flap and unfolded the contents slowly, like peeling back skin. It was from an insurance company, one I'd never heard of. "Dear Mrs. Holloway," it began. "This letter is to confirm the completion of the application process for a life insurance policy in which you are the insured party and Thomas Holloway is the primary beneficiary." I stopped reading. The black ink on white paper started to blur at the edges. My throat tightened. I read it again, slowly this time, forcing the words to land. Thomas? My son had taken out a life insurance policy on me without ever mentioning it? And now it was active. $1 million. That was the figure listed in neat, confident digits halfway down the page. I stared at the number for a long time. $1 million. That's what I was worth now, apparently. Not in the way a child tells his mother she's priceless, but in the way a banker tells a stranger how much they'll collect when you stop breathing. $1 million if I died. All going to Thomas. I folded the letter and unfolded it again, as if it might change, as if it might apologize. My eyes went to the kitchen sink, then the counter, and then, without meaning to, the glass from 2 days ago. Still sitting there. I hadn't touched it, hadn't dared. It had felt silly at first, paranoid even. But now it felt like something more. I picked up the glass and walked to the sink, emptied it, washed it twice. Then I sat down and read the letter all the way through. Every word, every clause, every line of fine print. Apparently, because I was over 70, a medical exam hadn't been required. Thomas had paid a higher premium for it. Willingly. Paid extra to not have to prove I was healthy. That fact lodged in my throat like a stone. The letter was dated 10 days ago, long before he handed me the glass. He'd done this quietly, intentionally, and he hadn't said a word. My hand reached for the phone almost by instinct. I thought of calling him, confronting him. But what would I say? Why am I worth $1 million to you, Thomas? Why now? Why didn't you tell me? I didn't call him. Instead, I went to my bedroom and pulled open the top drawer of my nightstand. It was full of old papers, birth certificates, my marriage license, a few old letters from my husband, yellowing at the edges. I found my own will, the one I'd updated last year after my hip surgery. I stared at it, my own shaky signature at the bottom. Thomas was listed there too. Executor. Sole inheritor. I sat on the edge of my bed and folded the insurance letter back into its envelope. People talk about heartbreak like it's a moment, a single shattering event. But this wasn't a crash. This was a slow unraveling. I looked at the photo on my dresser. Thomas, age 8, missing his front teeth, standing in the backyard with a worm in one hand and a juice box in the other. He used to run into my room in the middle of the night after thunderstorms, climb under the blankets, and hold onto my arm like it was the only lifeline he had. How does that boy become this man? How does he look at the woman who fed him, bathed him, carried him, and think, she's worth more dead than alive? I didn't have the answer, but I did have a copy of the letter, and I wasn't going to pretend it didn't exist. Not anymore. I laid in bed, eyes open to the dark, listening to the familiar groans of the old house, pipes clicking, wood settling, wind pressing soft against the window panes. Sounds that had once comforted me. Not anymore. Now they felt like warnings, whispers from the walls. It was around that time, before the sky turned blue again, that I decided to find out who Thomas had become. I say that carefully, because the boy I raised, the one who cried when he accidentally stepped on a ladybug, who hugged me so tightly when I scraped my knee in the garden I thought my ribs would crack, he would never have done this. But the man he had become? I wasn't so sure. And so, I began to watch him. Not in an obvious way, just closer. I waited for the patterns to reveal themselves. Thursday morning, he stopped by again. No warning. Said he was just in the area, which I doubted, since he lives across town and works from home. But I played the role. I smiled. I put on a pot of coffee. We talked about nothing. Weather, gas prices, something in the news about a celebrity divorce. He brought me a new kind of vitamin, said it was good for bones. Left it on the counter with the same careful precision as the glass of water. I didn't touch it. The next day, he came with groceries. My favorite kind of bread. The right brand of orange marmalade. He even remembered I liked my eggs brown, not white. The little things, the kinds of details only someone who'd lived with you for years would remember. And that was what scared me most. He was trying too hard. Like someone making up for something, or worse, laying the foundation for something yet to come. I started checking things, quietly. The pill bottles, the dates on the milk, the locks on the windows. I dusted off the old fireproof box where I kept my legal documents and started going through them. Made copies, hid them in separate places. Called my lawyer, arranged a quiet appointment for the following Tuesday. I even called my doctor, asked for a fresh copy of my medical records. I wanted a clean, recent timeline, something that showed I was healthy, sharp, functioning. Because I had the strangest thought as I was brushing my teeth that night. What if someone tries to say I'm not? It sounds paranoid, I know. But sometimes the truth lives in the places people tell you to ignore. On Sunday, Thomas invited me to his house for dinner. He said he wanted to cook for me. He never cooks. Not even when his father was alive. That had always been my job. Or the takeout menus. Still, I said yes. I needed to see his space, his eyes, his patterns. He picked me up in his car, opened the door for me like he used to when he was in high school, and trying to impress me after staying out too late. He played soft jazz on the drive over. I noticed the speed limit never once exceeded. His house was spotless. Not just tidy, sterile. No shoes out, no mail on the counter. Nothing personal in sight. Not even a photograph. I felt like I was in a showroom. Dinner was salmon, perfectly cooked. Roasted vegetables. Fresh herbs. A glass of red wine already poured and waiting at my seat. I didn't touch the wine. Call it intuition. Or survival. We made small talk for a while, and then he excused himself to take a phone call. Said it was a client. But he left the door to his office slightly ajar. And that's when I heard it. Just one sentence. A man's voice on speaker. Once the death certificate is processed, the funds should clear in 10 business days. That was it. 10 business days. My heart stopped, then roared to life. I moved quietly back to the dining room. Sat down, composed myself. When he returned a moment later, smiling, I smiled back. But that was the moment I knew. My son wasn't just planning something. He had already started the clock. I didn't speak on the ride home. Not more than a few words anyway. That's what you do when you're sitting in the passenger seat of a car, driven by someone who may want you dead. You don't argue. You don't accuse. You don't let them see you flinch. When he dropped me off, he walked me to the door like a perfect gentleman. Kissed me on the cheek even. Said he'd call tomorrow. And then he waited. Waited until I was inside. Waited until the door clicked shut behind me. Only after I heard his car pull away did I let myself lean against the door, my breath leaving me in a single shaking exhale. My knees gave out, and I slid to the floor. That night, sleep was not an option. I paced the kitchen, made tea, didn't drink it, picked up the phone, Put it down again. Who would I call? The police? And tell them what? That my grown son had cooked me a lovely dinner and took a phone call he thought I didn't hear? That I hadn't drunk a glass of wine or taken a vitamin? They'd smile. Maybe offer to check in on him. Maybe even stop by and scare him. But what if that only accelerated things? What if he felt cornered? No. I needed proof. Something more than intuition and overheard whispers. Something solid. By dawn, I had a plan. A small one. But plans are like seeds. You plant them in fear, and if you're careful, they grow into escape. The first thing I did was call my friend Harriet. She's the kind of woman who always knows someone, and it always ends in information. She'd worked at the courthouse for decades before retiring, and nothing about her mind had slowed down with age. I didn't tell her everything, just that I was looking into something odd involving my son, some paperwork I'd seen by accident, and whether she knew how to find out who filed for certain documents. "Give me a day," she said. "Maybe 2. I answered Thomas's calls. I let him drop off groceries. I thanked him for the vitamins and even pretended to take one. I flushed it down the toilet when he left. I poured the wine into the plant near the fireplace. I let him feel in control. Because the more confident he felt, the more careless he'd become. Once, I found him in the living room already, sitting there like he belonged, like he owned the place. I asked how he'd gotten in, and he waved a spare key I'd forgotten I ever gave him. "Just wanted to surprise you," he said. "Thought we could have lunch." That afternoon, after he left, I changed the locks. And that evening, Harriet called. "I don't want to say this over the phone," she said, her voice tight. "Can you come by tomorrow?" I did. And when she handed me a manila envelope, I felt the weight of what was inside before I even opened it. Thomas hadn't just taken out one policy. He'd taken out 3. Different companies, different amounts, all filed in the last 4 months. He had gone out of his way to spread the coverage, divided it so no one raised a red flag. No one, except for an old clerk at Harriet's old courthouse who recognized his name on multiple beneficiary records. "That's not all," Harriet said quietly. "I found something else." She handed me a printed document. It was from a nursing facility. Application pending. My name was on it. I went home with that envelope on the seat beside me. I didn't cry. Not then. There's a kind of heartbreak that goes too deep for tears. I thought about that look in his eyes, that strange smile, that careful dinner, the vitamins, the wine, the warmth. And I thought, this wasn't my son anymore. Not the boy I raised. This was someone else. Someone who knew exactly what he was doing. And someone who didn't think I had the strength left to stop him. Rain came in soft and steady the next morning, a gray veil over the neighborhood. It tapped against the kitchen window like a visitor too polite to knock. I hadn't spoken to Thomas since the afternoon I'd found out about the nursing facility application. That envelope Harriet gave me was still on the dining table, unopened since I last looked through it, but I didn't need to read it again. The contents were tattooed in my mind, policy after policy. But it wasn't the signatures that haunted me. It was the line at the bottom of the nursing form, the one labeled "Reason for Admission." It read, "Mild cognitive decline, potential onset dementia, for patient safety and supervision. Patient, not mother, not Margaret, not even mom. Patient." Later that day, Thomas called. I didn't answer. He texted twice. "Hey Mom, everything okay? Haven't heard from you." Then again an hour later. "I'll come by tomorrow with some groceries. Call if you need anything." The next morning, I packed a small bag. Just essentials. A few clothes. Important documents. I placed the envelope from Harriet carefully between 2 sweaters. I took my passport. birth certificate, my medication, the original copy of my will, and I left the house. Not permanently. Not yet. But I needed to see something. I needed to see if the Thomas I remembered, the real one, still existed. I took a cab across town to the pharmacy where Thomas used to pick up my prescriptions. It's a small place, family-owned, run by a woman named Lila, who'd known me for years. She'd once told me Thomas was her favorite of my children, and I remember laughing and telling her he was my only. I waited until the store was quiet before I approached her counter. "Lila," I said softly, "has Thomas asked you for anything strange lately?" She looked at me, her brow wrinkling in concern. "Strange?" "Any changes to my prescriptions, questions about dosage, anything that might have seemed out of place." She hesitated, not out of suspicion, but out of caution. Then she stepped around the counter and ushered me toward the back office. "He asked me 3 weeks ago if there was a way to have your pills delivered," she whispered, closing the door gently behind us. "Said you'd been forgetting to take them, and he didn't want you to miss any doses." I thought it was sweet, at the time. "Did I miss any?" I asked. She shook her head. "You've always been precise. We keep records." I nodded, not sure whether to feel comforted or more disturbed. "And did he ask about anything else?" She looked away for a moment, then pulled out a slip of paper from a drawer. It was a printed label, one that never got used. Name, Margaret Holloway. Medication, lorazepam. Dosage, 1 milligram as needed. Quantity, 60 tablets. "That's not mine," I said immediately. "I've never been prescribed that." "I know," Lila said quietly. "But he asked what would happen if someone your age were taking it regularly. He said you were having trouble sleeping." I stared at the label, the ghost of my name in bold letters. "And what did you say?" I asked. "I told him it wasn't safe," she replied. "Not in that quantity, not for someone living alone." I left the pharmacy with shaking hands, not just policies, not just a nursing facility. He was gathering the pieces, a paper trail, a narrative, forgetful, declining, confused, unsafe. He was laying the groundwork, and I was running out of time. That evening, I returned home just after dark. I stood at the edge of the driveway for a long time, staring at the warm glow coming from the living room window. I turned my key slowly in the door and entered with care, half expecting the air to feel different, tainted somehow. But everything was exactly where I left it. The dish towel still hanging crooked over the oven handle, the half-used candle on the mantel, the glass of wine I'd poured into the ficus 3 days ago, its scent now clinging faintly to the soil. I locked the door behind me and slid the deadbolt home. Then, without taking off my coat, I walked to the kitchen and opened the cupboard where I kept the mugs. Third shelf, tucked behind a chipped one from a church raffle, my small voice recorder. It was something Thomas had bought me years ago, when I'd been working on documenting our family tree. Back then, he said it would help me capture memories. I doubted he ever thought I'd use it to protect myself from him. I tucked the recorder into my coat pocket, just in case. Then I turned off all the lights, walked through the house once to make sure the windows were secure, and finally allowed myself to sit down. He was building a case. It wasn't just about the policies. It wasn't about the nursing home. It was about plausibility. If something happened to me, if I slipped and fell, or forgot the stove on, or accidentally took the wrong medication, there'd be paperwork, a paper trail, whispers that I'd been showing signs, a dutiful son, doing his best, an aging mother who wouldn't accept help. That's what they'd say. That's what he wanted them to say. And the worst part? They might believe him. The next day, I went to the bank. Not the one Thomas knew about. I deposited enough to carry me if I needed to disappear for a while. I also rented a safe deposit box. Inside it, I placed the envelope from Harriet, the printed medication label Lila had given me, and a new copy of my will, one I'd revised that morning with a lawyer who asked no questions and accepted cash. Thomas was no longer listed as my sole beneficiary. He would find out eventually, but not yet. Let him keep thinking he had control. That evening, I returned home to find my front door unlocked. Not open. Just not locked. I stood there for a long moment, heart pounding, before slowly pushing the door open and stepping inside. The house was silent. Everything looked normal. Nothing missing. Nothing broken. But something was off. There was a faint smell in the air. Something synthetic. Chemical. Not strong, but sharp. I moved slowly through the rooms, checking each one. The kitchen. The hallway. My bedroom. Then I saw it. On my nightstand. A fresh glass of water. No note. No message. Just water. Waiting. I didn't touch it. Didn't empty it. I left it sitting there like a dare. He had been inside. Inside enough to stand over my bed and place a glass of water where I'd find it. I sat down on the edge of the mattress, the recorder still warm in my coat pocket. I turned it on, and I whispered, as calmly as I could, "If anything happens to me, it wasn't an accident. I was careful. I was healthy. I was aware. And I was afraid." Then I slipped the recorder under the bed, beside an old pair of slippers I hadn't worn in years. Because now I knew this wasn't just about insurance. This wasn't just about money. This was about control. And Thomas wasn't waiting for me to slip. He was preparing the fall. The following morning, I woke before the sun. Something in my spirit had shifted, like an old dog who no longer trusted the man it used to sleep beside. And I understood why. I hadn't touched the glass of water from the night before. I'd left it right where he put it, on the nightstand, just in case. Because if there was anything in it, I wanted proof. That's what everything had come down to now. Proof. By noon, I was on my way to the bank again, safe deposit box key in hand. But I didn't go straight there. I took a detour, a small one, to a law office tucked between a tailor shop and a florist downtown. No sign on the window, just a brass plaque beside the door and a buzzer you had to press. The woman who met me inside was middle-aged, sharp-eyed, and spoke like every word had already been pre-selected. I liked her immediately. "I need to protect myself," I said plainly, as we sat across from each other in the small conference room. She didn't flinch. "From whom?" "My son." Again, no flinch, just a slow nod. "Tell me everything." So I did. Her pen didn't stop moving the whole time. "I want my power of attorney reassigned," I said once I'd laid it all out. "Removed from him, immediately. I want to amend my will again, add a clause in case of early or sudden death. I want my assets placed in a trust under my control, and I want a record of all of it, time-stamped." She looked up at me. There was no disbelief in her face, only a kind of cold, professional clarity. "We can do all of that," she said. I nodded. "And one more thing." "Yes?" "I want a record left behind, something that says I was clear-minded when I made these decisions. Not just a signature, something undeniable." She considered this, then stood, disappeared down a hallway, and returned with a handheld video camera. "If you're willing," she said, "we can record a verbal affidavit." I was willing. We filmed it in one take. When it was over, she burned the video to 2 discs, sealed one in an envelope with her firm's stamp, and handed me the other. I walked out of that office feeling, for the first time in weeks, like I wasn't completely helpless. But that feeling didn't last long. Back at home, I noticed something immediately. The rug by the back door was crooked. That rug never moves. Not unless someone kicks it. And there, in the faint dust along the tile, I saw it. The light impression of a shoe print. I walked through the house slowly. Nothing stolen, nothing out of place. But the bedroom closet door was open, just slightly. And on the floor, beside my slippers, the voice recorder I had hidden was gone. I stood there for a long time, frozen. Then I looked at the nightstand. The glass of water was back. Same spot, same level. But I knew the difference. This one was full. He had been here again. He knew I was watching him. Now he was watching me back. And I could feel the walls closing in. I didn't sleep that night. Again. I lay perfectly still beneath the quilt I'd stitched myself 20 years ago, staring up at the shadows on the ceiling as the house settled around me with groans and sighs that used to feel like home. My heart beat slow and heavy, like a warning bell muffled by cotton. Every creak in the floor, every hum of the refrigerator, every distant passing car, it all felt like something more now. The voice recorder was gone. That was the truth I couldn't shake. It hadn't slipped. It hadn't fallen. No houseguest or cleaner could have moved it, because I hadn't allowed anyone inside. Except him. Thomas had found it, which meant he knew. Not just that I suspected. Not just that I was growing cautious, but that I was preparing. And still, he came back. Left the water again. Not because he needed to, because he wanted to. Because now it was a game. That morning, I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I called my lawyer, the new one, and told her I needed to open the safe deposit box. Immediately. She met me at the bank without asking questions. We went into the vault together, and I handed her the evidence I'd gathered so far. The original insurance letters, the nursing home application, the pharmacy label, a copy of the video affidavit we'd recorded, and a list, handwritten in careful block letters, of everything I had experienced over the past 6 weeks. The late-night phone calls, the water, the vitamins, the voice recorder, the changing locks, the rug, the footprint. I signed a statement and asked her to keep it sealed unless I went missing, was hospitalized, or was found deceased under suspicious circumstances. She didn't blink, just nodded once and locked the box shut again. After that, I went to the cafe across from the courthouse and ordered a coffee I didn't drink. I sat by the window and watched people come and go, young mothers wrangling toddlers, old men checking parking meters, teenagers glued to their phones. Life in motion. And there I was, a ghost in the middle of it, living one step behind the next betrayal. It was around noon when I saw him. Thomas. He was crossing the street toward the county records office. Not toward work, not on an errand. He was dressed too carefully, walking too deliberately. And he wasn't alone. He was with a woman I didn't recognize. Blonde, early 40s, smartly dressed. She carried a folder under one arm, and as they walked, she was pointing to documents inside it while he nodded. I knew that posture. I'd seen it at parent-teacher conferences, real estate closings, insurance offices. She was a professional, and she was working for him. I stood up so fast my chair nearly toppled. I left the coffee, the tip, the paper napkin I'd been folding and unfolding in my hand. I didn't care. I followed them. Not closely, just enough. They entered the county building, disappeared into a hallway I knew well. Real estate, title records, legal filings, and that was when I understood. He wasn't just after my life. He was after my house. I slipped into the building a few minutes later, heart pounding, trying to look like any other woman checking on old paperwork or property taxes. I wandered the lobby, waited, thought I'd missed them, and then I saw them again, coming back down the hallway. Thomas was holding something now, a manila folder, and he was smiling. I don't remember walking back to the car. I don't remember unlocking the door or starting the engine. All I remember is gripping the steering wheel like a lifeline, shaking from the inside out. He was trying to take it all. Not just money, not just dignity, but my home, my name, my rights. Piece by piece he was erasing me, while smiling. And I knew then, as clearly as I'd ever known anything, this wasn't just manipulation. It was premeditated. It was theft in slow motion. The rain returned that night, heavier than before. It hammered the roof like footsteps in a rush, like something coming and not stopping. I sat at the kitchen table, lights off, the only illumination coming from the street lamp outside and the dull, flickering glow of the stovetop clock. Midnight, then 12:01. I didn't move, not even to blink. I just sat there with the folder in my lap. The memory of Thomas walking out of that county building burned like a fever behind my eyes. That folder in his hands. That satisfied little smile that belonged more to a man signing off on a business acquisition than a son managing his mother's affairs. He was close, closer than ever. And now, he was bringing in outside help. People with credentials, signatures, badges, authority. I knew what was coming next. Some quiet visit from a medical professional I'd never met, asking polite questions, assessing my mental state. I'd smile, answer clearly, say all the right things, and none of it would matter. Because the paperwork would already be filed, the script already written. It wouldn't take much. A suggestion here, a signature there, just enough to push the story forward. And then, one day, I'd wake up in a facility somewhere with pastel walls and quiet halls. I'd be told it was for my safety, that my son had made the arrangements out of love, that the world was too dangerous for a woman in my condition, and no one would question it, because he was calm, because he was patient, because he was my son. I couldn't let that happen. So that night, while the rain beat against the windows and the house creaked in its bones, I went into the attic. In the corner, behind a stack of broken-down holiday boxes and a bin filled with outdated cords and unused tools, I found the safe. I hadn't opened it since before he died, but the combination came back to me with strange ease, like a song from childhood. Inside were only a few things. A small envelope with our marriage license, a silver locket I thought I'd lost years ago, and at the very bottom, wrapped in a faded cloth, a bundle of cash, old bills, probably saved in case of catastrophe, earthquake, war, or something quieter, like this. I took the locket and the money, and something else. A tiny voice recorder, different from the one that had gone missing. Older, clunkier. One my husband had used to tape interviews back when he wrote editorials for the local paper. I hadn't thought of it in years, but it still worked. I tested it with a new battery, pressed record, and spoke directly into it. My name is Margaret Holloway. I am of sound mind and body. I am speaking these words freely. I have reason to believe that my son, Thomas Holloway, is attempting to declare me mentally unfit in order to obtain control of my assets and estate. I have documented this. I have made legal protections, and I am preparing to leave this house for my own safety. If I am found dead, missing, or hospitalized against my will, this message should be considered my testimony. I pressed stop. Then I hid the device, not under a bed or in a drawer, places Thomas would check, but in the one place he never visited. The garden. I wrapped it in plastic, tucked it inside a small waterproof box, and buried it beneath the hydrangeas near the back fence. I used to tell him they were my favorite flowers, but he'd never remember. He'd never ask. By the time I finished, my knees were soaked and my hands were streaked with dirt. I stood in the rain a while longer, letting it wash away the mud, the fear, the trembling that had become my constant companion. Inside, I packed a single suitcase. Just clothes. Nothing else. No heirlooms. No photos. No mementos. I left those for the house to keep. I didn't plan to be gone long. Just long enough to breathe. To think. To get ahead. But as I zipped the bag shut and looked once more around the place that had been my world for 32 years, I felt a strange detachment take root in me. This house no longer felt like mine. It felt like something he had already claimed. And it was time to reclaim myself before he erased me completely. The morning I left, the sun was out for the first time in a week. Bright and unsympathetic. The kind of clear light that makes things look clean, honest, when they're anything but. I didn't say goodbye to the house. I didn't need to. You don't bid farewell to a battlefield. You retreat, regroup, and live to fight another day. I called a car service using a burner phone I'd picked up at the drugstore 2 towns over, cash only. The driver didn't ask questions, just helped me load the single suitcase into the trunk and adjusted the rearview mirror to see me without seeming like he was watching. He had kind eyes. That made it worse somehow. "Airport?" he asked. "No," I said quietly. "Just outside of town. I'll give you directions." I didn't want him to know where I was going, not until we were halfway there. I trusted no one now, not even the strangers. That's what this had done to me. The air outside was crisp, tinged with the first breath of autumn, but my eyes still burned. Not with fear, with resolve. Thomas had taken too much already. My peace, my sleep, my trust. But he wouldn't take my name, my voice. Not unless I gave it to him, and I never would. We arrived at a cottage nestled behind a grove of trees just past the county line. It belonged to Harriet's cousin, a woman named Faye, who'd moved out to the woods after retiring from the postal service. She opened the door in a flannel shirt and house slippers, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "You're Margaret," she said, her voice flat but not unkind. I nodded. She looked me over once, then stepped aside. "Well, come in then." The room was small but warm. A quilted bedspread, a lamp with a cracked base, a wooden dresser that smelled faintly of lavender and mothballs. No cameras, no listening devices, just silence, blessed and whole. "You don't have to talk about anything," Faye said after helping me settle in. "But if you want to, I'm a good listener. I'm better at that than talking anyway." I believed her. That night, I sat on the edge of the unfamiliar bed with the suitcase still half unpacked at my feet. The events of the past few weeks circled me like vultures. I tried to quiet them, tried to sleep. But the body doesn't forget what fear feels like, and mine had learned it by heart. So I wrote instead. Longhand, in the same notebook I'd used for grocery lists and holiday plans. But this time, I wrote everything. I started with the first strange look, the first glass of water. I detailed the letters, the phone calls, the pharmacy visit, the nursing facility paperwork. I described Thomas's face, his calm, his control, the way he tilted his head when he asked if I'd taken my pills. I wrote until my fingers cramped. Then I signed it, dated it, and tucked it beside my pillow. I fell asleep with the window cracked open, the wind whispering through the screen. And somewhere, between 2 and 4 a.m., I woke with fire in my chest. At first, I thought it was panic. Another wave of fear rising, sharp and fast. But this was different. Not fear, not anxiety. Pain. Deep, growing, seizing pain. I sat up, gasping, clutching at my nightgown. My vision blurred, and the room tilted, strange and wrong. My hands tingled. My legs felt distant. My breath came short. It felt like I was being pulled underwater, slowly. I stumbled to the dresser, fumbled through the drawer where I'd stashed the burner phone. I dialed the emergency number with fingers that barely worked. The dispatcher answered, her voice too loud, too far away. I remember giving my name, the address, saying chest and pain and please. And then I remember nothing. Darkness, like a door, closing. But I remember one last thought before everything fell away. I didn't drink anything. I didn't take anything. Unless... And then nothing. Just the sound of rain again, somewhere in a memory I couldn't reach. When I opened my eyes, the ceiling above me was white. Too white. The kind of white that buzzes slightly, sterile and hollow. I didn't know where I was at first, just that the air smelled like antiseptic, and the world had slowed to a crawl. Every sound was muffled. The soft beep of a monitor to my left. The hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Somewhere nearby, the distant murmur of voices behind a closed door. Hospital. My mouth was dry. My body ached in places I couldn't quite locate. A plastic tube ran beneath my nose, cool air streaming in, and when I tried to lift my hand, I found an IV taped to the back of it, connected to a bag of something clear and slow dripping. I blinked slowly, letting my eyes adjust, and tried to sit up. Pain lanced through my chest, not sharp, not unbearable, but enough to warn me to stop. I slumped back against the pillow and stared at the ceiling. And then it came back. The cottage, the wind, the night, the pain, calling for help, fumbling for the phone. The last thought before the dark swallowed me. I didn't drink anything. The door opened, and a nurse walked in. Young, tidy, polite in that distant way hospital staff are when they've seen too much. She glanced at my chart, then at me. "Good to see you awake, Mrs. Holloway," she said, smiling faintly. "You gave us quite a scare." "What happened?" I asked, my voice dry as paper. "You had a cardiac episode," she said gently. "Your EKG was abnormal when the paramedics arrived, and your blood pressure was dangerously low. They stabilized you on the way here. You're in good hands now." A cardiac episode. It sounded too neat, too safe, like something that just happens to women my age, out of the blue. But I knew better. "Did someone bring me in?" I asked. She looked down at the chart again, hesitated. "You were alone when the ambulance arrived," she said. "You called them yourself." I nodded, though that didn't answer the real question. "Has anyone come asking about me?" I said. "A man. My son." She shook her head. "Not since you were admitted. Would you like me to call someone for you?" I thought about it. Harriet, the lawyer, even Faye, though she'd probably already heard the news and was cleaning out the guest room just in case. But I said no, because I needed to think, because something wasn't right. And then she added, almost offhand, "The doctor will be in soon. We've ordered labs and a toxicology screen just to be thorough." Toxicology. That word rang in my ears like a fire alarm. I looked up at her, forcing my voice into something steadier. "Why would they do that?" "Standard protocol with unexplained drops in heart rate and pressure," she said. "Especially in cases where a patient isn't taking any medications known to cause those symptoms." I nodded slowly, heart pounding, not from weakness, but realization. They'd found something, or they were expecting to. And suddenly, I wasn't just a mother trying to protect herself. I was a potential victim in the eyes of a medical system built on documentation and cause. They were going to find it, whatever it was. When the nurse left, I lay back and stared at the wall. The truth settled on me like a cold blanket. Thomas hadn't needed to find me. He'd already reached me. Somehow. The suitcase? The tea at the cottage? Something in the food? Or maybe I'd underestimated him completely. Maybe he hadn't followed me at all. Maybe he'd planned for this moment weeks ago. Whatever had entered my system had taken its time, and it nearly worked. I drifted in and out of sleep for hours, jolting awake every time the monitor beeped or a door clicked somewhere nearby. Nurses came and went. An orderly changed my IV. At one point, I overheard 2 staff members in the hallway. "Strange case," one said. "Vitals all over the place, but she was lucky. Whatever it was didn't finish the job." "She doesn't look like someone with enemies," the other replied. "Kind of reminds me of my grandma." I wanted to laugh, or cry, or both. Because the truth is, sometimes, it's not strangers you need to fear. It's the people who know exactly how to smile when they poison you. By the next morning, the labs had come in. A doctor stood at the foot of my bed, frowning slightly as he read the clipboard. "There was a substance in your bloodstream," he said. "Something that doesn't show up on most screens. It metabolizes quickly. Nearly missed it." "What was it?" I asked. He hesitated. "A sedative. Not something prescribed to you. Not something we'd expect to find without context." My heart thudded in my chest. He continued. "It wasn't enough to kill you. But in combination with your blood pressure medication." "I don't take blood pressure medication," I interrupted. The doctor blinked. "According to your chart, you do. It was found in your system." I stared at him, breath caught. I'd never touched those pills, but someone had given them to me. Someone who knew they'd mix well with just enough sedative to mimic heart failure. I turned my head toward the window. The sun was rising again, and I knew, now more than ever, Thomas wasn't just waiting for me to die. He was rehearsing it, practicing, and next time, he wouldn't leave so much room for error. The hospital room changed after that conversation. Not physically, nothing moved, nothing shifted, but the air felt different. Like every inch of it now knew I was in danger, and it was waiting to see what I'd do with that knowledge. Even the beeping of the machines felt less like a lifeline and more like a countdown. I stayed quiet when the doctor left. I didn't ask for more clarification. I didn't ask for the chart. I knew it wouldn't help. Whatever they found, whatever combination of sedative and blood pressure medication had been swirling inside me, would be written down in cold, neutral language. A nurse came in not long after and said I had a visitor. She said it like it was good news. I turned my face to the wall and told her I didn't want to see anyone. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded and stepped out again. I didn't ask who it was. I didn't need to. I already knew. He would have found out. Hospitals have a way of calling emergency contacts, even if you don't ask them to. And Thomas was meticulous. He would have been monitoring my accounts, my phone records, maybe even the GPS on my car. That burner phone might have bought me time, but not much. I'd underestimated how far ahead he was playing. He knew I was here, and he would come. Later that afternoon, I buzzed the nurse again, told her I needed to speak with hospital security. She raised an eyebrow but nodded, and 20 minutes later, a man in a Navy uniform with a walkie-talkie clipped to his belt stepped into the room. His name was Ramirez. Broad shoulders, kind eyes, not too quick to speak. I liked that. "I need to put someone on a no-visit list," I said calmly. "My son, Thomas Holloway. If he comes asking for me, I want you to tell him I've been discharged, or transferred, or anything you like. Just don't let him in this room." Ramirez blinked. "You sure, ma'am?" Very. He studied me for a moment, as if weighing my face against the request. Then he nodded. I'll take care of it, he said. You're not the first. That sentence echoed in my ears long after he left. I'd been so alone in this nightmare. But maybe not everyone who smiled in public was safe behind closed doors. Maybe the world was filled with mothers like me, people with bruises no one could see, staring across dinner tables at sons they no longer recognized. That night, I wrote again. This time, it wasn't a diary entry or a note for my lawyer. It was a letter. To Thomas. Not to send. Not for him to read. Just to purge. I wrote, You used to ask me to check your closet for monsters. You were 5 and afraid of things that didn't exist. I told you I'd always protect you from what was hiding in the dark. I never imagined that one day I'd be the one hiding from you. Then I folded the letter, sealed it, and tucked it into the drawer by my bed. Proof for whoever came next. The next morning, a new nurse brought my breakfast. She didn't speak much, just a polite nod and a quick check of my vitals before slipping out. But she left behind a small plastic cup with my pills in it, 3 of them, round and white, the kind that all look the same. I stared at them. One was aspirin. That much I could tell. The other 2? Not labeled, not explained. I didn't touch them. Instead, I waited. 30 minutes later, when the nurse hadn't returned, I pressed the call button. A different nurse came. I held up the cup. Can you tell me what these are? She frowned, checked the clipboard. You're not due for anything but a pain reliever this morning. I nodded slowly. Then I'd like to keep them, I said, setting the cup aside. In case anyone asks. I didn't sleep the rest of that day. I kept the blinds drawn and the door locked, even though they said I didn't need to. I asked for my meals sealed, my water bottled. I made them list every pill before I swallowed it. That evening, Ramirez came back. Your son was here, he said quietly. About 2 hours ago. My stomach turned to ice. He was polite, he continued. Said he just wanted to check in on you. Seemed surprised when we told him you weren't allowed visitors. What did he do? Smiled. Said he understood. Asked which facility you'd been transferred to. I waited. Ramirez's expression darkened. When we wouldn't say, he just nodded and walked out. But he didn't go to his car right away. Just stood outside, staring at the hospital for a while. A silence stretched between us. He's waiting, I whispered. Ramirez didn't respond. He didn't need to. We both knew the truth. Thomas hadn't lost. Not yet. He was just being patient. The hospital discharged me 3 days later. I was physically stable, according to the paperwork. Heart rate normal, blood pressure even, no residual signs of the episode that had nearly pulled me under. They used phrases like medically cleared and out of danger, but none of them reached me. Not really. Because when you've been hunted from the inside out, danger doesn't sit in your blood work. It waits at the corner of your name. Faye picked me up in her battered old sedan. She didn't ask questions, just placed a wool blanket across my lap like a mother would and drove in silence. Her radio played classical music low, the kind that made you feel like the world could still be soft if you closed your eyes long enough. I didn't close mine. You'll stay with me until you're ready, she said, eyes fixed on the road. We'll keep the curtains drawn. You can use the back bedroom, the one with the bolts on the inside. I nodded, throat tight. I'll tell people you went to stay with your niece in Ohio, she added after a while. It's far enough to be inconvenient, close enough to sound true. She was already protecting me in all the small, unseen ways that mattered. Back at the cottage, the world felt different. smaller. I moved like a visitor in my own life, touching nothing, speaking less. I kept the burner phone close and the hospital folder closer. The toxicology report had arrived before I left. One final, quiet piece of the puzzle. The sedative had a name now, something used in veterinary clinics. Undetectable in small amounts. Potent in the wrong hands. It wasn't just a misstep anymore. It was intentional. That night, I sat by the fireplace while Faye boiled water for tea. I didn't want any. Not yet. I couldn't bring myself to trust anything that came in a cup. But I appreciated the gesture. "Margaret," she said gently, sliding a small dish of crackers between us. "You know you're going to have to face this. You can't keep running forever." "I know," I said. But I was already planning. The next morning, before the sun came up, I dressed in silence and left the cottage through the back. I didn't want Faye to know where I was going. Not because I didn't trust her, but because the less she knew, the safer she'd be if he ever came looking. I made my way into town by bus, sitting at the very back, sunglasses on, hat low. The morning commuters didn't give me a second glance. Just another old woman traveling light. They didn't know I was carrying evidence in my purse. They didn't know I'd buried my voice in a flower bed behind the house. They didn't know I was one breath away from losing everything. The courthouse was quiet. I moved like a ghost through the marble halls, heart pounding in rhythm with my steps. I found the clerk's window and asked for the file I knew existed, the one Thomas had smiled about the day I saw him with that woman. Power of attorney request, mental capacity affidavit, early transition of estate proceedings. They handed me a folder, no questions asked. My name was on it, in bold. I took it to a bench in the far corner of the lobby and opened it slowly, as if it might bite. And there it was. His name, his signature, his narrative. "She's been forgetful lately," it read. "Left the stove on 3 times. Confused me with my brother. Got lost coming home from the store. Lies. But well crafted. Mild. Reasonable. A sprinkle of concern rather than accusation. The kind of lie that sounds like love." I flipped through page after page, my hands trembling. Letters from doctors I'd never seen. Statements from neighbors I barely spoke to. A signed affidavit from someone listed only as home aide, claiming I'd exhibited signs of paranoia and confusion. It was all there. A quiet demolition of my personhood, laid out in legal ink. He was building a paper woman, fragile, confused, ready to be handled. And then he would step in, clean and calm, to take control of her world. And no one would ever know that she'd been screaming the whole time. I sat there in that courthouse lobby for a long time, the file heavy in my lap. Then I took out my phone and opened the voice recorder app I'd downloaded the night before. I held it to my lips and whispered, "He's trying to erase me." I saved the file and backed it up twice. Because if Thomas was going to kill me on paper before he tried again in the flesh, I needed to make sure my voice lived longer than my body. This was no longer just about escape. It was about staying alive long enough to be believed. The night I returned from the courthouse, Faye didn't ask where I'd been. She just looked at me a little longer than usual, then placed a bowl of soup on the table and quietly slid a cloth napkin beside it. No questions, no pressure, just presence. That's how real safety moves, softly, without announcement. I ate the soup. Not all of it, but enough to quiet the hunger I'd been ignoring for days. Then I told her what I'd found. I laid the courthouse folder on the table between us, opened it slowly, and showed her the affidavit from the so-called home aide, the doctor's letters I'd never authorized, the request for guardianship that Thomas had filed with steady, deliberate handwriting. Faye read silently. She didn't gasp. She didn't clutch her chest. She just listened and read and let the horror of it sink into the wood grain between us like spilled ink. After a long pause, she said, "He's trying to bury you alive." And I nodded. Because there was no other name for it now. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a dispute over money or a difference of opinion about care. This was execution by paperwork. A quiet, clinical dismantling of a person's identity. One checkbox at a time. "I don't think he's done," I said quietly. This was just the groundwork. He didn't expect me to find it. But now that I have, now that I've survived the sedative, the hospital, the isolation, he's going to push harder. "Let him," Faye replied. Her voice wasn't angry. It was steady, low, almost peaceful. "Let him come." She stood, reached into the side drawer near the pantry, and pulled out a small black pouch. When she unzipped it, I saw what looked like a compact camera, but bulkier, older. She held it like it was familiar. "I used to install these in mail trucks," she said. "To catch porch thieves. It's motion-triggered. Records onto a micro SD. Doesn't look like much, but it works. You want to catch him? Let's catch him." I stared at the device, then back at her. "You believe me?" Her gaze met mine, unwavering. "I believed you before you said a word." We set up the camera that night. One inside the front entryway, pointed toward the door. One in the back, aimed at the hallway that led to the bedrooms. She even had a third, smaller, less obvious. We placed it in the kitchen, tucked beside the curtain rod above the sink. "You think he'll come here?" I asked. Faye didn't answer right away. Then she said, "He already has, Margaret. Just not physically. Yet." I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, fully dressed, blanket pulled up to my chest like armor. I kept the burner phone on the pillow beside me, my finger resting on the emergency dial button. Every creak of the house made my breath catch. Every wind gust outside felt like footsteps. I'd never felt my age so deeply, not in my joints or my bones, but in the weight of being alone. But at some point, I drifted off. And when I woke up, it was still dark. The digital clock blinked 3:12 a.m. Something was wrong. I couldn't say what exactly. Just a shift in the air. The way the silence held itself, like it was trying too hard to seem normal. I reached for the burner phone, but it wasn't there. The pillow beside me was empty. I sat up slowly. The door was slightly ajar, and I knew. I rose to my feet, every nerve in my body screaming to freeze, to hide, to wait. But I moved anyway. I padded to the hallway, breath shallow, pulse deafening, and that's when I saw it. The front door, unlocked, open just an inch. A breeze moved through it gently, like a sigh. I didn't scream. I didn't panic. I walked slowly to the door and pulled it shut. Locked it. Then slid the chain into place. My hands didn't shake. Not until it was over. I turned and walked back into the kitchen. And there, on the counter, sitting next to the empty fruit bowl, was a single glass of water. Cold. Fresh. Still beaded with condensation. He'd been here. Again. I didn't call the police. I went straight to the small black pouch where we kept the SD cards. I switched out the one from the front camera, slid it into the adapter, and loaded it onto Faye's old laptop. And I watched. At 2:54 a.m., the camera picked up movement. The front door opened, not forced, unlocked. A figure stepped inside, dressed in dark clothes. No mask, no gloves. It was Thomas. He walked with purpose, calm, like it was his house. He looked straight into the hallway camera, not startled, not concerned. Then he walked to the kitchen, opened the cabinet, took a glass, filled it at the sink, set it down gently, turned, paused, and smiled. Not at the camera, at me. He knew. Then he left. The entire visit lasted less than 2 minutes, but it told me everything. He wasn't just trying to erase me. He wanted me to see it happen, piece by piece, until I started to question what was real, until I begged for someone to take control, until I handed him the very pen he needed to write the end. But I wasn't giving it to him. Not anymore. The morning after the break-in, I watched the footage 5 more times. Not because I didn't believe what I'd seen. I believed it. Every slow step, every breath he took inside that house was burned into me now. I could have closed my eyes and drawn it frame by frame. No, I watched it again because I needed to feel it. All of it. The intrusion, the certainty, the arrogance on his face when he looked into that hallway lens. He hadn't come in to check on me. He hadn't come in to talk. He came to remind me that this war was still being fought on his terms. But he made one mistake. He left a witness. This time, I had proof. I sat at Faye's kitchen table, laptop open. The video paused on his face, the moment he smiled into the camera, as if to say, "Look what I can do and still get away with." I stared at it for a long time, longer than I cared to admit. There was something hollow in that smile, something performative. Like he didn't just want to scare me, he needed me to see that I was helpless. Except I wasn't. Not anymore. Faye came in from the garden around 9, her boots muddy, hair pulled back in a loose scarf. She took one look at me, then at the screen. "So," she said, "he finally made his move." I turned the laptop toward her. "He thinks he's invincible." She leaned over, squinting at the frozen image. "Number. He thinks you're alone." That's when I made the decision. I would go public, not with the police, not yet. I didn't trust that route. I knew how these things played out. He hadn't hit me. He hadn't stolen money. He hadn't left a mark. To the outside world, I was just another elderly woman spinning stories, paranoid after a health scare. But the internet? That was different. The internet could turn a whisper into a siren if you knew how to speak. Faye helped me create a new email, a new profile, a locked-down identity. I didn't use my real name, just my voice. And I told the story. I uploaded the security footage, redacted the timestamps, blurred his face just enough. I shared snapshots of the insurance paperwork, the forged doctor's notes, the legal filings I'd found in the courthouse folder. I even recorded a short video, just my hands, my voice, explaining what it feels like to be slowly erased by someone you raised. I didn't beg for attention. I didn't ask for sympathy. I asked for eyes, and ears, and truth. By the 3rd day, the video had been shared over 10,000 times. By the end of the week, 60,000. And then came the messages. Some from strangers offering support. Others from people with stories that mirrored mine. Mothers, grandmothers, even fathers who had been isolated, manipulated, discredited by children with too much legal access and not enough heart. Most had never spoken out loud about it. They were still hiding, still second-guessing, still wondering if maybe they were the problem. But my video gave them something. Not hope, exactly. Something simpler. Something quieter. Permission. Permission to believe what they already knew. Faye printed the messages and left them on my pillow like flowers. I read every one. And I felt something start to shift. Not in the world. In me. Thomas had built a story, a performance, a fragile, calculated illusion of concern. But now I was telling one too. Except mine had facts, footage, and 1,000 echoes. And then, 2 weeks after I posted the video, an envelope arrived at Faye's front door. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. 12 words. Take down the video, or I can't be responsible for what happens next. No signature. No threat. Not on the surface. But I knew that voice. And it didn't matter that it wasn't signed. Because only one person would use can't be responsible as a threat disguised as mercy. I folded the letter slowly. Faye watched me from across the room. "Are you scared?" she asked. I shook my head. I'm done being scared. Because when someone threatens you after you've already survived their worst, they don't realize the threat doesn't land the same way anymore. Fear doesn't work once you've walked through it and lived. He wanted silence. He was about to get a storm. Faye poured me a cup of tea that evening, sliding it across the table like she always did. No fanfare, no expectation. I didn't reach for it. Not yet. I looked at the steam curling in slow spirals above the rim, rising like smoke from a signal fire. Then I slid the envelope across the table to her. She read the typed message in silence. When she looked up, there was something sharper in her eyes than I'd ever seen before. "Do you want to call the sheriff?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I finally lifted the teacup to my lips and drank. A small act, but it meant something. "No," I said. "I want to finish this." Faye nodded once. Nothing more needed to be said. For weeks, I'd been running, hiding, documenting, protecting myself like a woman crouched under a table waiting for the earthquake to stop. But this wasn't an earthquake. It wasn't something that would pass with time. This was a storm being driven toward me by one man, my son, and he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. Control. My silence. My name on the dotted line, even if he had to trace it himself. And now that his performance was beginning to unravel, now that the internet had cracked open his carefully constructed fiction, he was trying to shove me back into the corner he'd built for me. I wasn't going back. The next morning, I sent a private message to one of the women who had commented on my video, a retired probate lawyer named Janet, who had shared a story about her own mother's estate being taken over by a niece. We scheduled a video call for that afternoon. I borrowed Faye's laptop, set it up on the kitchen table, and when Janet's face appeared on the screen, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, with a voice like gravel and oak, I felt a strange calm wash over me. "I've reviewed everything you posted," she said without preamble. "I believe you." Those 3 words nearly brought me to tears. "I have no idea what to do next," I admitted. "That's where I come in," she said. "And you've already done the hardest part. You made noise." She walked me through the process, step by step. How to file a counter affidavit to the mental competency claim. How to submit proof of forgery to the state board overseeing the doctors who'd signed those fake evaluations. How to petition the court to freeze access to any joint assets Thomas may have quietly transferred into his name. It was like learning how to reattach the walls of a house someone tried to demolish while you were still inside. And then, just as the call was ending, Janet said something that changed everything. "There's a way to accelerate this," she said, leaning closer to the screen. "It's not easy, it's messy, but if you're willing." "I'm willing," I said before she could even finish. "You file a civil injunction," she continued. "Name him directly. Accuse him of coercion, fraud, attempted poisoning, everything. It puts the spotlight on him, forces his hand. He can't hide in the shadows anymore. No more fake lawyers or whispers behind doors. It becomes public. He'll have to answer." That was it, wasn't it? That was the thing he feared most. Not me speaking, not the video, but having to explain himself. Out loud. in front of people who could ask real questions. By the end of the day, the paperwork was started. Janet would represent me pro bono. Said she'd been waiting for a reason to step back into the courtroom anyway. She called it her retirement hobby. I called it grace. And that night, for the first time in what felt like months, I slept. Not because the danger was gone, but because I had finally turned to face it. The next morning, the doorbell rang at 7:12 a.m. Faye opened it while I stood behind the hallway wall, holding my breath. A courier stood there with a clipboard and a thin envelope. "Delivery for Margaret Holloway," he said. "Certified." Faye signed. The man left. She handed me the envelope without a word. Inside, neatly typed on law firm letterhead, was a notice of intent. Thomas was suing me for defamation. The video, the posts, the accusations. He called them libelous, claimed they were ruining his professional reputation, said I was exhibiting clear signs of degenerative paranoia, and that I was being manipulated by online vultures who feed on the vulnerable. I laughed, not a joyful sound, a bitter one, dry as splinters. "He really thinks he's going to silence you like this," Faye muttered. "No," I said, folding the letter slowly. "He thinks he's already won. This is just the cleanup." But it wasn't, because Janet had already filed the injunction. The date was set. In 6 days, Thomas would be served. He'd have to respond, in person, on record. And I'd be there, sitting across from him, with every file, every video, every letter he thought I'd never find. He'd look at me, smile that same empty smile, and I'd smile back. Because sometimes the only way to survive a monster is to drag it into the light and let everyone see it's just a man in a mask. 6 days. I could wait. Let the world turn. Let him bluff. Let the wolves circle. I had time now. Time to breathe. Time to prepare. And when that courtroom door opened and I stepped inside, it wouldn't be as a victim. It would be as the woman who refused to disappear. The courthouse was smaller than I remembered. Maybe it had always been this size, but everything feels bigger when you're afraid. Walls closer, ceilings taller, doors heavier. This time, they didn't feel like walls at all. They felt like thresholds. Faye parked out back, behind a row of dusty sedans and one pickup with a cracked windshield. She turned the engine off and looked at me without saying anything. She didn't need to. Her hand reached over the center console and closed gently over mine. That was all. No pep talk, no dramatics, just presence. I wore navy, not black, not gray. Navy, soft, quiet, deliberate. My hair was pinned back, my papers tucked in a simple leather folder. I didn't want to look pitiful. I didn't want to look combative. I wanted to look like myself. The version Thomas had spent so long trying to erase. Janet was already inside, waiting near the bench outside courtroom 3B. She rose when she saw me, her face calm and unreadable, like stone warmed by sun. Her silver hair was pulled into a low twist, her suit pressed, shoes polished. She looked like someone who'd argued down demons and won. "He's here," she said, without preamble. I nodded. "He brought counsel," she added. "Young, flashy, exactly what you'd expect. Lots of gel and self-importance." I let out a slow breath, then followed her through the heavy doors and into the room where everything would happen. The courtroom was mostly empty, save for a clerk near the bench and a bailiff seated by the wall, half watching us, half scrolling through his phone. There were no cameras, no reporters, just a quiet, sterile sort of expectation that hung in the air like a judge's breath before a verdict. And then the door opened behind us. I didn't turn around, but I felt it. The change in the room, the temperature shift. The silence became heavier, He walked in. I could hear the cadence of his shoes, measured, confident, not rushed. I knew that rhythm better than I should have. And then I heard the scrape of his chair across the floor, the soft murmur as he leaned in to whisper something to his attorney. Janet whispered too. Don't look at him. But I already had. He was wearing charcoal gray, a tie that looked expensive, and that same smug expression that had grown roots on his face. But his eyes, those had changed. A flicker of something unsettled. Like he wasn't used to being dragged into the light before he was ready. The judge entered a few minutes later, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a voice like a gavel. She adjusted her glasses, looked down at the folder in front of her, and said my name. And just like that, it began. Janet started with the facts. Her voice was even, every word carefully measured. She laid out the timeline, the life insurance, the fake prescriptions, the nursing facility paperwork filed without my consent. She showed the forged doctor's letters, the financial documents, the video footage. She let the silence do as much work as her voice. Your Honor, she said, stepping forward. This is not a case of misunderstanding or familial concern. This is a calculated, methodical attempt to strip my client of her autonomy, her assets, and, had it not been interrupted, her life. The judge didn't react. She just nodded slowly and turned to Thomas's attorney. He stood, slick and overconfident, already reaching for the familiar playbook. My client is a devoted son, he began. He has spent years managing his mother's affairs, at her request, I might add, due to concerns regarding her increasing confusion and erratic behavior. These documents were not forged. They were precautionary. He turned to me then, smiling the way snakes smile in bedtime stories. What we have here, he said to the judge, is a grieving mother, recovering from a health scare, being manipulated by online strangers and social media attention seekers. I didn't blink. Janet rose again. Let's ask the video what it thinks, she said. She played the footage. The courtroom was silent except for the soft hum of the laptop. We all watched Thomas walk into that house. We watched him pour the glass of water. We watched him set it down and look at the hallway camera. And we watched him smile. The room stayed quiet even after the screen went black. Thomas's lawyer stood up like he had something to say, but the judge held up her hand. I've seen enough, she said. She looked at me, then at him. Mr. Holloway, she said, her voice low but clear. You will cease all attempts at guardianship immediately. You will have no further legal access to your mother's accounts, property, or medical decisions. Any violation of this will be considered contempt. He started to speak. She shut it down. You may leave, she said. This court is adjourned. The gavel fell like a final door slamming shut. And that was it. We walked out into the sunshine. It felt unreal. The way war ends not with fireworks, but with silence. There were no reporters, no confetti, just the same cracked sidewalk we'd stepped over that morning, and the sound of a bird somewhere nearby, singing into the blue. Janet squeezed my shoulder. You won. No, I said softly, watching Thomas exit the building behind us, his jaw tight, hands clenched. I survived. That's better. Faye pulled the car around, opened the door for me like she always did. Before I got in, I turned back one last time. Thomas was standing on the courthouse steps, talking to his lawyer, gesturing too fast. He didn't look like a man who'd lost. He looked like a man who was recalculating, plotting his next move. But for the first time, I wasn't scared. Because now, the world knew. And once the truth has air, it never goes back into the bottle. I got into the car and shut the door. Faye asked, "Home?" "No," I said, smiling for the first time in weeks. "Let's go get pie." And we drove into whatever came next. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening, for seeing, and for believing. I never imagined I'd have to fight my own son to keep my name, my voice, my life. I never thought the same hands I once held to cross the street would one day draw up papers to erase me, or that love, twisted by entitlement, could grow into something so cold and calculated. But here's what I've learned. The people who try to silence you most are the ones who fear what your voice might reveal. And your voice? It matters. Even if it shakes. Even if it's tired. Even if it's been ignored for too long. Because when you speak, you remind the world that dignity doesn't come with conditions. It isn't earned by age, status, or clothing. It's a right. A birthright. Yours, mine, ours. This story isn't just about me. It's about every person who's ever been called paranoid for noticing the cracks, who's been made to feel dramatic for saying something's wrong, and who's been told to sit down and be quiet when they should have been heard. If that's you, let me say this clearly. You're not alone. Protect yourself. Document everything. Speak up, even if your circle is small. Because sometimes the most dangerous people wear polite smiles and carry your last name. Sometimes, too, a locked door, a hidden camera, and a single act of defiance are all it takes to pull back the curtain. And once you do, there's no going back. Thank you for watching. If this story spoke to you, type "I see you" in the comments. Click on the left to watch the next story, and don't forget to subscribe to stay connected. Your story matters.